Welcome, everybody. This is Devin. We talk about writing daily. We talk about different aspects of writing, self-promotion, how to get more accomplished, getting it all done, finishing your writing and putting it out into the world in every way possible. So I'm your host, Devin Galaudet. I am the editor-in-chief of In the Know Traveler, and I'm also the author of the forthcoming book, 10,000 Miles with My Dead Father's Ashes. Welcome. If you like what we're doing here, please make sure that you click the like button and ask questions anytime, even if it's just going to be touching base for a few minutes. It is great that you're here. Welcome, Bruce. Good to see you, my friend. Anyway, today I'm going to talk about poetry, and I've been dreading this one for ages, only from the standpoint, like, I kind of love poetry, and I have a history of poetry, which I'm going to describe to you about, but I don't know squat about poetry. Like, I have an MFA in creative writing, but I have this appreciation for it. And so I'm going to tell you a couple stories, if that's all right. My mother used to prop me up, at least this is the legend. She used to prop me up, and she used to regale me with poetry. And matter of fact, I even have one of the poems that was sort of like the common one that she used to read all the time. And so I'm going to share that with you now. Oh yeah, of course, like this. Let's see. Good. I'm so glad. AJ, really good to see you. So anyway, the poem is called The Touch of the Master's Hand. Frequently it's attributed to Anonymous. That's not true. So I'm just going to read this, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about poetry. 'Twas battered and scarred, and the auctioneer thought it scarcely worth his while to waste much time on the old violin, but he held it up with a smile. "What am I bidding, good folks?" he cried. "Who will start the bidding for me? $1, $1, then two, only two, $2, and who'll make it three? $3 once, $3 twice, going for three, but no." From the room far back, a gray-haired man came forward and picked up the bow. Then, wiping the dust from the old violin and tightening the loose strings, he played a melody pure and sweet as caroling angels sing. The music ceased, and the auctioneer, with a voice that was quiet and low, said, "What am I bidding for the old violin?" And he held it up with the bow. $1,000, who'll make it two? 2,000, and who'll make it three? 3,000 once, 3,000 twice, and going and gone, said he. The people cheered, but some of them cried, "We do not quite understand. What changed its worth?" Swift came the reply, "The touch of the master's hand." And many a man with life out of tune, who's battered and scattered with sin, is auctioned cheap to a thoughtless crowd, much like the old violin. A mess of pottage, a glass of wine, a game, and he travels on. He's going once, he's going twice, he's going and almost gone. But the master comes, and the foolish crowd never can quite understand the worth of a soul and the change that's wrought by the touch of the master's hand. So the best I can do, hey, Bill, the best I can do when I talk about poetry is just kind of go with the truth, which is poetry for me is writing that has been sort of like, it's like a reduction sauce. Like, you keep adding water and you keep boiling it down, and it gets more and more concentrated. And so I think poetry in its very nature, like, I know that a lot of poetry comes to us from the idea of like moon, bloom, June, gloom. In other words, ideas that rhyme, that have a certain meter and a certain flow to them. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I kind of look at it that good poetry works on multiple levels. And I think part of the reason why I wanted to discuss poetry is I remember a long time when I was in a BA program, I remember having this incredible instructor, Ed Frankel. And he was talking about, he basically said, he kind of like raised his hand up high and he said Shakespeare. And then on the other hand, he raised his hand equally high and he said Emily Dickinson. And at the time I was like shocked. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, because Emily Dickinson, some weird shut-in, right? Isn't that the case with her? And, Shakespeare is freaking Shakespeare. And and his point is that the things that Shakespeare did to change language and to change writing and the way that we understood and tell stories, Emily Dickinson was equal to that task in many ways. In other words, she did things grammatically that changed writing. She did things with meter and rhyme and not rhyme that made her unique. And here's the thing that was interesting. I eventually went on to go do this MFA program, and what he said about Emily Dickinson always kind of like stuck with me. And so what I ended up doing was I thought, okay, I had to write this, I think it was like a 50-page paper or something like that. And so I ended up choosing her with the subject. And when I did some cursory research on her, she's one of the most written about people ever. And when I was writing this this paper on her, there were like, at that time, and we're talking like 150 years after she had died, 130 years after she had died, there was something like 6 new biographies that were coming out about her, in part because she was kind of an interesting oddball. She was either a shut-in or she wasn't, or she was a lesbian or she wasn't. But what was for sure is that in discussing her work with people who were more knowledgeable than I was about poetry and writing in general, is that she had this ability to write about things 120 years ago and it still sort of played. Do you know what I mean? Like, it still works. The things that she does is still remarkable. Oh, and I just want to thank you for joining us, Michael and April and Tori, Eugene and Cicely. It's great that you're here. Thank you so much for stopping by. So what I ended up learning is that poetry, even though kind of when you think of poetry as an art form, we kind of think of it in the distance and in the background. But I think what's important about poetry is that it boils things down in ways that other writing can't. Like, you are required to feel the words for it to really have its effect. You kind of allow poetry to wash over you. And so I guess, I have this fantastic book, which is all of her works, and they tried to put it together in the way that she had initially put them together. And so I kind of literally opened up to a random page, and this caught my eye, so I'm going to read this to you as well. She dealt her pretty words like blades, how glittering they shone, and everyone unbared a nerve, or wantoned with a bone. She never deemed she hurt. That is not steel's affair, a vulgar grimace in the flesh, how ill the creatures bear. To ache is human, not polite. The film upon the eye, mortality's old custom, just locking up to die. And so that's intense, and it's beautiful. And she does it in really 12 short lines. And I think it's a remarkable thing. So I don't know if there's any particular thing. I mean, normally I try to have some sort of a lesson in these podcasts. And I think what I'm meaning to do today is kind of invite myself, probably more than anybody else. Like, I think, people who are into poetry love it. You know what I mean? Like, there are so many poets that I know who just like, they do it because they need to do it, because they love to do it. And it's beautiful. And so I'm kind of reminding myself that the art form, like, we talk a lot about screenwriting, we talk a lot about, fiction, but we don't necessarily talk about poetry. And I think really when we talk about the art form of writing within itself, that's kind of the starting point. You have to go back hundreds of years, and this is what we started with. This was the art form of writing that went beyond communication. And I think it's kind of an incredibly important thing. So that's what I've got for today. But please, as always, please consider hitting the like button. If you want to talk about writing with me, absolutely ask a question. I've got some more writing interviews that are going to be coming up, so that's going to be fun. And stick with me, because this is Writing Daily. I still don't know squat about poetry. It doesn't really matter. We're here to kind of like live and grow and learn from each other. So anyway, thanks for being here for today. And as always, keep coming back. I'm going to be offering more writing stuff because it is endless. And that's what I've got for today. Thanks for stopping by.